Hi, welcome back. I'm al-Hilo and I'm your instructor in the poetry of the 16th century or the Renaissance age or the age of sonnet or the Elizabethan age. We have some replaceable names for this age. So welcome back and let's move on to talk about the origins of sonnet. Look, as we've talked in the previous lecture, that sonnet belonged to one of the most and main important categories of poetry in the 16th century, which is the lyrical poetry. We know little about the real origins of sonnet, so we are going to discuss only what is mostly known in a nutshell, in a summary about the origins of sonnet. So, sonnet belongs to lyrical poetry, and lyrical poetry, as discussed in the previous lecture, it is a form of poetry which expresses personal emotions or feelings, typically spoken in the first person. So, the appeal of lyrical poetry is the heart rather than the mind. That's why the Elizabethan age, the age of the 16th century, it is sentimental rather than rational. That's the distinct mark of this age, because after after the radical break with the medieval ages, before the rise of the Tudors to the throne of England, we had that type of religious biblical literature which only highlighted those religious, supernatural, metaphysical features of poetry, which doesn't really care about the emotions of people, about the individual stance of the readers and the audience. They do not really care about what's going on in the mind and the heart of people. That's why they only limited their themes and their subjects about biblical issues, about those figures in the Bible, those prophets and saints which are well known in the Old and New Testaments. That's why there was no place for the heart. Now, with the rise of a new age in poetry, in literature in general, we have that type of emotional, of sentimental poetry, which tries to aim its goals and its subjects to the heart of people. It's emotional, it's personal, and mostly it's spoken in the first person. The first person always is subjective. It's closer to the heart. It's when the writer speaks in the first person, it means that he is trying to speak his heart, his emotions, his feelings. There is no place for rationalization, because always the stance of the first person is subjective, and subjectivity means that it is mostly some emotional, sensational speaking. That's why the first person always is closer to the heart. He is always trying to talk about his personal, individual experiences of life, of the sadness, of the grief he has experienced, of the joy he is going through, of the love he is feeling. That's why the first person is always closer to the heart rather than the third person. So sonnet belongs to lyrical poetry, which was the dominant form of poetry in the 16th century. And the next point is that the sonnet was the most popular form of the lyrics in the Elizabethan age. The Elizabethan age might be called the age of the sonnet. The sonnet has a challenging poetic form which is not easy to write. The sonnet was really popular in the Elizabethan age because it was a new form in that age, and because it was new, people or writers or poets tried to experience their ability to explore their poetic power, their poetic authority in this new form, because it was, as Foucault calls it, it was the strata of the age, it was the modes of the age to try those new modes. That's why sonnet was a new form, was a new poetic form, a literary form, which was on the rise, which reached its peak, its climax. And that's why all the poets, almost all the poets, wrote their ideas and their poetry in poems. We find so many poets who tried this genre, and of course it was somehow challenging in so many aspects. Challenging is in its mainly in its rhyming scheme. The rhyming scheme of sonnet is somehow, paralyzing. It's chaining. It chains the writer. It puts him in some framework which he has to abide to. That's why he does not have that freedom that he has maybe in narrative poetry or in epic. He should write in only 14 lines. He should express his ideas and feelings, his love, his sadness, his grief, his sorrow, his inspirations, his ambitions. He should write those ideas, those themes in only 14 lines. And those 14 lines are, limited within certain rules. Mostly, as I told you, the rhyme scheme, which we are going to, explain in details in the coming lectures. And the other point is that the structure of the sonnet is somehow complicated. For example, in the Italian sonnet, again, we are going to talk in detail in the coming lectures. The Italian sonnet has its forms, its different forms. Like there is a pause in the middle, which is a turning point in the ideas, in the thoughts of the poem, from the problem into the solution. And of course, we have that couplet at the end, which summarizes all the ideas. It carries the weight, the authority, the power, the main idea of the poem. That's why the form, the structure of sonnet is so challenging. It's not really easy to write, and only few, succeeded to immortalize their name in the records of history as the masters of sonnet. Like, for example, Shakespeare, of course, that's number one, who wrote immortal, everlasting, literary pieces, sonnets, like 116, like his sonnet 55, and other perfect sonnets. All his sonnets or his works are immortal, are perfect. We have also John Milton, who wrote amazing pieces. We have Spenser. We have Christopher Marlowe. We have other writers who perfected this genre, this new form, this new rising form, sonnet. That's why not all the poets succeeded in immortalizing their name, in mastering this new genre in sonnet. And the other point is that this 14-line sonnet originated in Italy, probably in the 13th century, and was used by two Italian masters, Dante and Petrarch. Sir Thomas Wytt and Henry Howard are credited with introducing and promoting the form in England early in the 16th century. It became a love poem in the beginning, but later it became a form for a variety of themes as social criticism, liberty, and alienation. So, first, the origins of sonnets, it comes from Italy. This perfect, sophisticated, educated, this museum, the whole country is a museum. It's full of history. It's full of epics. It's full of legends and immortal people, which are the source of inspiration. We have that Roman civilization, which we find so much in the poetry of this age and in the coming age. We have classicism, which are references to the Roman civilization. So Italy is the country of innovation, of literature, of novelty, of creativity. So I personally really love this country, especially after I read the masterpiece of Dan Brown, Inferno. I really love to visit this country because really it's a source of inspiration for me in all aspects of humanity, in literature, in philosophy, in history, in sociology, in all aspects and fields of humanity. So again, Italy was creative. It created this new genre, this sonnet. And historians believe that first it was written in the 13th century, and it was used greatly or perfected by two writers, Dante and Petrarch. So in the 15th century, Sir Thomas Wytt and Henry Howard, they were on a diplomatic mission to Italy, and they were really amazing. They didn't only stick to their missions, their political or diplomatic missions. They tried to get introduced to as many aspects of life, of educational fields, of humanities in Italy as possible. That's why they got introduced to this perfect, amazing genre, poetry, sonnet, and they borrowed this genre and brought it into England. That's to many students this might be some misfortune, but I'm really glad that they brought this into England. Though in history, other figures could brought this genre into England, but they were the first people to imprint their name in the history of literature. So they brought and borrowed this structure, this genre, and brought it into England. And they started writing sonnets by encountering themes like love. Of course, love was the dominant theme in sonnet, but we have different types of love, as we are going to see in the coming lectures. So later it became an experimental field. Sonnet. It became an experimental field for a variety of themes like social criticism, like criticizing the monarchy, the authorities, the falling morality of people, of the society, and of course they try to talk about liberty in sonnets, of course, and the problem of alienation. Of course, it's a Marxist concept or keyword, but maybe unconsciously they have been using this keyword or theme in their poetry, because the social problems is not some special aspect of the post-Marxist era, but alienation was something everlasting. It was an aspect through the beginning of human history. Like, for example, we see in the beginning of English literature, we have some poems that talk about alienation and how the speaker is cast out by his leaders, and like the Seafarer, we have that great masterpiece, and how he grieve his alienation, his isolation from his tribemen, from his tribe members, and so on. So sonnet became a field of talking and encountering such amazing themes, and of course we are going to see some examples in the coming lectures. So thank you very much for watching this lecture. We will have other keywords, other interesting themes and theories to deal with in the coming lectures. So please stay tuned, and thank you very much.